Welcome back to the Crown Report. Josh Schaefer, Scott Burnside. We are in the same place, but once again, we are not together. But that's okay because we've got another opportunity next week. But we're also both going to be at the games this week covering the Kings. Scott, it's great to have you here in California as the push for home ice in the playoffs continues. What jumps out to you about these next couple of games?
Well, I feel like I'm in the back cave, but I'm not really. It's really sunny, so kind of backlit issues, and I can't wait actually to get to the game tonight as we're taping this before the Anaheim Ducks come to visit. Join you on the pregame show again. Very excited about all of that, and of course, being in California for the duration of the Kings playoff run. And I know people were watching that Edmonton St. Louis game. Obviously, folks hoping myself as well, hoping that maybe the Blues could continue their hot hand and give the Kings a little bit more breathing room when it comes to securing home ice advantage, which we've talked about, and it remains of critical importance. I will say the sort of the silver lining for me, and I maybe Jim Hiller feels this way, maybe he doesn't, but the fact that the Oilers, by beating St. Louis, 2 points back now, the Kings have a game in hand. So tonight, later after we tape this, becomes that game in hand. And so I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily to have continued urgency down the stretch, right? I mean, it's been almost a week since the Kings secured a playoff spot, disappointing loss to Seattle after that. I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily to have some urgency to your game in in the final 10 days of the regular season. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to keep your edge. And it'll be interesting to see how the lineup, because my sense is it will be fairly fluid between now and the end of the regular season in terms of how many starts does Darcy Kuemper get? How often do we see Drew Doughty? Joel Edmondson, we know, along with Drew, didn't play against Seattle. So what the lineup looks like down the stretch is going to be really interesting. But I don't think it's a bad thing to have urgency, right? The team needs to rebound after a game that they let get away from them against Seattle, and I don't think it's a bad thing. What do you think? I'm a glasses half full guy.
I completely agree with you because, the Kings were missing some guys the other night. It certainly did not help from the Kings standpoint that Adrian Kempe had to leave the game for personal reasons. But so not only were you then down Drew Doughty, Joel Edmondson, Alex Turcotte, Tanner Jeannot, but also your leading scorer. So at that point, things were a little weird for the Kings. It felt like they were really shorthanded, But, I think for me, that presented some urgency. But going forward, I think you want that for the rest of the year. And now all of a sudden, at the time of recording, the Kings lead over Edmonton in the division for home ice, which was just 4 games after beating the Oilers. And spirits were high. Suddenly it's back down to 2 games after an Oilers win.
Yeah, 2 points is, yeah,
2 points. So that's interesting. And you know what? When you talk about urgency and not staying passive, not getting comfortable, I actually think of something that I heard on a broadcast the other night. It was one of the national games. Mike Monaco was doing the play-by-play with Ray Ferraro, and it was the Avs Golden Knights game. Game goes to overtime, and they bring up a 4-on-3 power play. They start talking about somebody's getting a 4-on-3 power play, and Ray Ferraro says, and I'm not going to quote him, but I'm paraphrasing. He says, "I would rather have a 4-on-3 power play than a 5-on-3 because there's urgency." Sure, there's more open ice, but there's urgency. Like, you don't have 5-on-3 and just 2 minutes to pass the puck around. You have to keep getting better, and you have to keep looking for opportunities. And that's an in-game example, but from a big picture thing for the Kings, now I think you can't get passive. You can't just pass the puck around the outside and hope something opens up for you. You have to be proactive at the same time and create your own opportunities. And now that's what you have with the division lead, or the lead for second place, down to just 2 points with a game in hand and only a couple of games left. One of them head-to-head against the Oilers at Rogers Place in Edmonton. So I like the proactiveness of this mindset that you have, because you don't want to get too passive, not at this point of the season when you're trying to peak. And, I don't know if peak's the right term, but I would say that over the last 3-4 weeks, Kings are exactly where they want to be. And I think you need to keep going to get into the playoffs. You can't just glide your way in.
Yeah. Well, and again, I'm not necessarily drawing a parallel, but I do remember having a conversation with Tampa head coach John Cooper. I think they had a 65 win season, won the President's Trophy, and then were swept by Columbus in the first round. And I just remember conversation, maybe it was in the off season, whatever it was. Enough time had passed that he could talk about it without losing his mind. And he said, what, we could not find another gear. We had completely, there was no urgency. The level of competition, they were so much better than everyone else that when it came time to really, like, it's such a cliche, but when it comes time to find that playoff gear and to find a way to play the way you need to play, not for 40 minutes, not for 45, but for 60 and sometimes 65 or 70, that team, as good as it was, could not find it. And again, I'm not suggesting the Kings are like that necessarily, but I think that's the dynamic where you want your team grinding and you want importance for every game. This game against Anaheim, before, as we're taping this game against Anaheim is really important. It's important to this Kings team. And I think that's a really good thing. And I think you do see some teams that struggle with that, who wrap up a playoff position or wrap up a division title or home ice or whatever it is with lots of time to spare. I think there's the pitfalls to that. And that's a real challenge for coaching staffs to try and make sure that you don't go sideways, because again, the ultimate cliche, you can't just flick a switch come April 19th.
And not only that, Scott, but at this point in the season, you're kind of trying to balance guys getting healthy and guys being sharp for the playoffs at the same time. And right now, as we mentioned, Kings have some guys that are out. Alex Turcotte has been out for a couple of games, along with Tanner Jeannot. Those two both were on a fourth line that was taking over shifts and periods in games before those two guys got hurt. Now, Jeannot still week to week. Turcotte is back with the team and skating. Not sure when he's going to return. Again, this is being recorded before the Anaheim game. Does he play tonight? We don't know yet. So, he could be already back in the lineup by the time you're watching this. But also, Drew Doughty didn't play the last game. Joel Edmondson didn't play the last game. Adrian Kempe left the last game in the middle of it. So at some point, we believe that one's not for an injury, but we're not going to speculate. But, when it comes to getting these guys healthy versus staying sharp for the playoffs, how do you balance that? Is there a load management thing here?
Yeah, well, and I think that, Jim Hiller was asked this the other night, and it sort of, he made him squirm a little bit. Not that the question was difficult, but I think there's, there are two ways to go at it. And as Jim Hiller mentioned, he has seen it work both ways, where you do, listen, every specific, situation is so specific. I don't profess to know exactly how Drew Doughty is feeling, and my guess is that there's a lot of candid conversations going on with the medical staff and with the coaching staff and with Drew about what's the ideal amount for you to play, given you're recovering from this serious injury that cost you more than half a season. Do you play, two of the next 5 games? What is the perfect amount? And I think those are the discussions that you have to be really candid about. And then, as we have talked about with Darcy Kuemper, where does Dave Rittich get he'll play for sure one of the 2 back-to-backs, Edmonton, Seattle next week. But how does Darcy Kuemper feel about, where he would like to be if, assuming the Kings continue their arc, they should open at home. They control their own destiny, whether it's on the Saturday or the Sunday, the 19th or 20th of April. What makes sense for Darcy Kuemper? And I think that's the challenge. And as Jim Hiller said, you can look historically. You can cut it both ways if you're just riding your lineup like you would every single night, or if you do make alterations to give people breaks. It is, and as he pointed out, you get judged past tense, right? You get judged by what happens. Like if you don't have success in the first round, then maybe then people will ask, well, maybe you should have done things differently, and anyway, that's above my pay grade. That's for sure.
Well, as the Kings continue their push for the playoffs, we will have another segment of Buy It or Burn It later on. We've
Can't
heard
wait.
People like that. Yes, that'll be a good one. Yeah. Scott does not know what's coming. I want to revisit one of the questions from last week's Buy It or Burn It. One of them was, Kings will have 6 20-goal scorers. Well, Fiala's there. Kempe is there. Kopitar is one away. Quinton Byfield scored his 20th goal of the season the other night. A highlight reel, General Grievous-looking goal against Seattle. Now, the Kings ended up losing that game, but this was a highlight reel one from QB. There's a possibility he has the goal of the year in the NHL in back-to-back seasons. Of course, he had the one against Columbus last year. But, I know this has been such an interesting 2 seasons now for Quinton, because last year he had some times of the season where he was just surging. And then he went through a goal drought for a while that he didn't score until like the last little bit of the season. And then this year comes back in with a brand new contract, high expectations, and a slow start, but a terrific second half. I know you spent some time with him. What's this season been like from your perspective for Quinton Byfield, and as he continues to move forward toward becoming a truly elite NHL player?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's been really interesting to watch. It's been interesting to watch even since I've been here in Los Angeles, which is just about a week ago. Since that time, we know the Amazon crews have been around preparing for their playoff behind the scenes stories from across the NHL, and the Kings are getting some love from Amazon, which is a terrific thing, and specifically spending some time with Quinton Byfield, his mom and sister Chloe and grandmother were in town, and I happened to be able to sit down and chat with Quinton's mom and his sister, and they told some great stories about growing up, and very funny sort of moments from Quinton's childhood and on through his junior days. But and then on top of that, it was interesting. TNT was in town. Anson Carter made the flight out from Atlanta to do a sit-down interview with Quinton Byfield. I talked to Anson after the interview, and we talked about Quinton. And I guess what sticks for me, I happen to be talking to Ray Ferraro about Quinton for a story that I'll be working on. And he was talking about when he first met Quinton, he was the youngest player in the World Junior Tournament, obviously the youngest player on Team Canada. The next year, he was the youngest player still on Team Canada. And his point was, you sometimes have to step back and remember just how young Quinton Byfield is. And I also chatted with Gary Roberts, the longtime NHLer, who is one of the great development coaches in the world. The Roberts program is, world renowned. Steven Stamkos, Connor McDavid, go down the list, and Quinton Byfield. And Gary Roberts said the same thing. He said, to me, he has always felt that Quinton Byfield was one of those special players that you need to have patience with. And when you think of somebody with his body frame, the smaller players maybe develop more quickly. They mature physically differently than tall, angular players like Quinton Byfield. But both Gary Roberts and Ray Ferraro said to me, this is a very special player. The fact that it may have taken a little bit longer than people thought or hoped, it should not be a surprise. And I guess that's for me, all the attention on Quinton Byfield, and such a young man, and to see his family, how close they are, to me, that it should bring optimism to Kings fans, because he has such a strong support network that some players will get overwhelmed with this kind of attention. I asked Anson Carter about this. Is he ever worried, right? He's just still a kid, and look at all the stuff that's going on. He says, zero issues with Quinton Byfield, worrying too much about expectations, all those kinds of things. And I think, this playoff year, it looms large for the Kings, obviously, but I think Quinton Byfield is going to play a significant role in, if the Kings are going to make good on tremendous promise and expectations in the playoffs, Quinton Byfield is going to play a big role in that. But it's been fun to watch all of this going around just as we get ready for the start of the playoffs.
He's only 22 years old, and
it is a shocking thing to think about, right? I think about what I was like at 22. I did not know a lot of stuff. And, I know they were giving Quinton a hard time about not knowing what all the compartments in the dishwasher were for at his house. And the fact that, not to spoil the start of my story, but yes, the Christmas tree is still up. But hey.
What? Is it real?
No. I think that would be a fire hazard. So
okay, good. Yeah, I was worried.
but his mom was telling me and the only reason we didn't see the rest of the Christmas decorations is that she just took them down when she was on this visit, and she was the one who put them up in November. So anyway, I mean, but things have changed. She was telling a great story about how when they went to, early on when he would go grocery shopping, they would FaceTime and he would like point at things. Do you think I should get that? Yes, you can buy that and cook that. And, place was very tidy. And, it was fun again, to talk to Chloe, the sister, and Nicole, Quentin's mom. His grandmother was tremendous too. She was telling the story about how she watches all the games, and she's a huge supporter of Quinton, and that must be, to your point, 22 years old, having that kind of network. And Dad Clinton, who was on the dad's trip, was home looking after the pets. So he obviously, the whole family still very much supportive. So it's gonna be, to me, that's one of the exciting parts of this playoff season is, this stands a very good chance of being Quinton Byfield's time.
Just off the top of your head, do you remember how old Drew Doughty was in 2012 when the Kings won the Stanley Cup for the first time?
I'd say he was 20. And I believe this to be the case because when I covered the Olympics in 2010 in Vancouver, and I believe he was 18. So maybe just turning 19 at the 2010 Olympics. So 2021?
He was 22. He turned 22 that season.
All right.
So what's funny is because the reason I bring that up is because for me, sometimes you forget how young Quinton Byfield is. Now, watching the 2012 Stanley Cup playoff run, I feel like in my head, sure, Drew Doughty's 22. I was however old I was at the time. I was a teenager. So I'm sitting there thinking like, he's way older than me at 22 years old. Seems really old. And then you look back to it and I think, oh my God, Drew Doughty was only 22 years old when they won in 2012. And he turned 23 that season, excuse me. And then when you look at Quinton Byfield, for me, now that I'm here and I see Quinton Byfield all the time, I still sometimes forget how young he is when you watch him play the game. And I think back to a text message I got from another NHL broadcaster a couple years ago when he was still up and down between the Kings and the Reign. Yep. And someone had texted me after a game, that Byfield kid is going to be very, very good. In a game where he was like, no points, a -1. Like, it's evident with the way that he plays the game. And now you're starting to see that. And he's got a career high 20 goals. So check one more off the list, Scott, for buy it or burn it. So that's a career high 20 goals. It ties a career high that he had last year. I think you can probably wager for at least 21 for QB in the regular season now. And we'll keep an eye on what could be like a first long playoff run for Quinton Byfield as well.
Totally agree. And that, and again, I always like to do these stories because I talked to Corey Stillman, of course, a longtime NHLer, won a cup in Carolina in 06, and has been head coach in the junior ranks, including Sudbury, where Quinton played his junior hockey. And, same kind of thing. He was, talked about talking to Kings management, just this kid. He said, I told Rob Blake, I haven't seen a kid this good come out of junior hockey in a long time. And okay, good things happen to those who wait. Isn't that how it goes? Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left in the show, Scott. So I think it's time we transition into buy it or burn it. And we're going to start off with a lighthearted one. I think the way that I'd kind of like to do this going forward, I think we'll float it out there. Maybe small picture, big picture, like league-wide picture. So I've got a few for you today. We'll kind of try this out. But the first one, not hockey related. I've got coffee with me. Buy it or burn it. Hot coffee in the winter, iced coffee in the summer exclusively. Buy it or burn
Negative.
it.
Burn that.
Really?
I can honestly tell you, I can count on one hand the number of iced coffees I've had. And sorry,
really?
I mean, if I happen to go to, I don't even know how to order the sizes right in a lot of places. So, no, I'm totally, got to be hot coffee, and it's got to be. I mean, if I'm having coffee, it's hot.
Okay.
if it's not hot, it's not coffee. Sorry.
Yeah, I think once again Zach Dooley will get another reference on a show that he's not even on yet. But I'm pretty sure Zach Dooley's the same way. It's just a hot
Yeah.
black coffee everywhere.
Yeah. No, I
You
like a
put
lot
cream
of
or
cream in
sugar in
my
it?
coffee, but
Okay.
no, just cream. But I like a lot
Okay.
of cream in my coffee, and I'm pretty particular about. I got to tell you, a lot of press boxes around the NHL serve pretty substandard coffee. I'm
They
just saying.
do.
Yeah, it's
They
got.
do.
Yep. So
I I don't remember where it was, so it's good that I can't say where it was because I wouldn't either way. There was a game this year on the road where I thought to myself, "Wow, this is the worst coffee I've ever had," and could not. I didn't take it to the booth, like
yeah,
could not
no,
finish it.
yeah.
But which
I
is
don't know
bad
why that
because
is.
for me, like I'll take a coffee with me, like game tonight at Crypto. I'll take a coffee from downstairs and I will
Good.
take it upstairs for the pregame show. And my
Yep.
goal is I would love to have it throughout the game, but
Yes.
I take it up to the booth and then I start the pregame show. And then by the time I remember my coffee's there, I've got about that much left of a lukewarm coffee. I would
Yeah.
rather it just be iced coffee. But again, for a game though, for me, I go through the winter summer thing. So in the summer, I'm drinking iced coffee. In the winter, I'm drinking hot coffee. But at a game, there's ice down in front of us. I'm always drinking hot coffee at a game.
Okay.
So
Well, I feel good about that. All right.
okay.
I like
All right. So we're burning that one. Next one, Scott, the Pacific Division standings. We had one last week like this too. Buy it or burn it. The Pacific Division standings are final already. We just don't know it yet.
I'll buy that. Yeah, I don't see it changing, and I do think the Kings will answer the bell and they'll continue to their hold on second place. Didn't get any help the other night with Vegas at Colorado, so I think probably first place is that's probably not going to happen. So I'm with you. I'm going to buy that. Standings are what they are. All right, let's go. In fact, I talked to somebody from the team the other day. Was like, could we start the playoffs tomorrow? So anyway, I think that's going to happen. So buy that.
I'll buy it too. I think hypothetically the Kings right now have a game in hand. It's not going to stay that way, and they'll meet Edmonton head to head. But let's just say again, this episode you'll probably be watching it after the game tonight has been played. However, let's just say that the Kings win. They're 4 points back out of first. They're 4 points ahead of Edmonton. I don't really see them moving all that much. Now they can. They absolutely can. But I feel like it's kind of set at this point. And I'm confident with where everybody else is set. Even in the Western Conference, I'm not sure it's going to move all that much. It can, but I'm pretty confident that it'll stay.
Yeah, the St. Louis Minnesota thing is interesting because
Yes.
the Blues have now lost 2 in a row, including the loss to the Oilers the night before we were taping this, and they've started to get healthy. Kaprizov back for the Wild.
They won in overtime the other night with Kaprizov, so
yeah, Eriksson Ek back as well. That's a big deal for them, and it's that obviously will change up. Who plays Winnipeg, who will be the top seed in the Western Conference, and who will play Vegas, assuming they stay at atop the Pacific. But you're right, and as well as as good as the Winnipeg, Dallas, Colorado the trio are, I think that probably stays the same as well. So I think I agree with you with that. But the Blues Wild, that will change the first round matchups a bit.
If you asked me 48 hours ago, I would have told you that the Blues passed the Wild. Now I don't know. But the recent Blues losses, Minnesota winning in overtime in a wild game against San Jose. I don't know. I'm thinking it's kind of set now.
Yeah. Marc-Andre Fleury, his last home start of his career.
Yeah.
In all likelihood. So
Yes.
and great on him. Hall of Famer in the waiting. But yeah, that game was probably not one he'll keep on he'll keep the highlights of, that's for sure, with the 7-6. So
yeah. No, I don't
8-7.
I don't think so.
8-7,
yes.
I believe.
8-7.
So, yes.
8-7 in overtime. All right, next one. The Kings finish with the most home wins in the NHL this season. Buy it or burn it. And to give you some context, right now at the time of recording, the Kings have 29. Now, if they win tonight, it'll be 30. Either way, after tonight, they will have 2 more games left on their home schedule. Saturday against Colorado, next week on the 17th against Calgary. Right now, Winnipeg has 29. The Kings have 29. The Carolina Hurricanes have 30 with 1 game left.
Yeah.
The Kings finish with the most wins at home this season, or tied for the most home wins this season. Buy it or burn it.
I'm going to buy that. I'm going to buy that because I do think it may not be an outright win, but I think they're at least tied when the dust clears. And I like the, you know, I like the potential. The Calgary game is kind of going to be interesting because by then we may know, do the playoffs start Saturday for the Kings at home? I know in theory the NHL would like to give teams that play on the Thursday night that extra day off before starting the playoffs, but there are a number of teams who are playing on Thursday night, and it may not be possible to give them all the night off. And I know with Edmonton, their plans are if they are going to play in Los Angeles to start the playoffs, they play in San Jose and will just stay on the West Coast, so they won't go home. So the Thursday night game against Calgary may not have much meaning, but obviously Colorado on a matinee on Saturday, and then the Ducks is after we tape this. I think they come up with at least 2 wins of the 3, and I think that's going to be enough to give them at least a tie for what would be a very impressive NHL home record for the regular season. What do you think?
I agree with you.
Right.
I think I tried really, really hard to figure out a buy it or burn it along the lines of this question that did not, interfere with the game on the day of recording. But
Right.
I think I framed it in a way that works regardless of the outcome tonight. And I think regardless of the outcome, the Kings have at the time of recording 3 home games left, 5 games in total. Not only am I confident that the Kings can win all 3, but I think that they win 2 of the 3. Whether it's tonight is one of them or not, I think they win 2 of the 3, which would put them in a tie for the most home wins this season. Now, at least hypothetically with Carolina, if they win their final game, Winnipeg has 29 wins as well. Now, I did do a little bit of research. As of right now, the Kings, at least in terms of win percentage, are not quite in like the top 20 best home seasons of all time. They can get there, but they are certainly among the best home seasons in recent memory. Because if you go back to the 90s, there's like only 2 or 3 teams that have had similar ridiculous home success in a single season. Now, one of them was the Bruins a couple of years ago. The Bruins had an insane home record as well. So I think the Kings will get there. They'll be on the cusp of like this top 25 home seasons ever. I'm not sure they get quite there. But again, what they've done at home this year is nothing short of ridiculous, and they've got a few home games left. So come out and see them before the playoffs begin. And that's another reason why the Kings want home ice just so badly.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. And I do think it's important. It's interesting. We talk about identity a lot on the show and in terms of style of play, but I also think that the team's identity is also tied up in how formidable they are at home. And I think it's important for these players. They take so much pride in it, and to finish strongly at home. That's why it's a disappointing loss to Seattle. Again, in the end, it may not mean that much in terms of the standings, all those kinds of things. I think this team's pride in building a team record, home record this season is a real and it's a tangible thing. And so I think my guess is in that room, they want to finish strongly at home. And if they do, they will open at home in the playoffs. But I think the point of pride at continuing this record-setting pace at home, it can't be discounted. So I'm with you. Like we talk about, taking the foot off the gas, all those things. I think playing well at home to close out this regular season is very important to this group, and it should be. And they built something here, and they understand that.
Well, Kings trying to get home ice in the Stanley Cup playoffs. That push continues. We will keep you covered for these next couple of days. Scott is around here in LA covering the Kings for the rest of the season. And we're going to be back for another episode, hopefully in person next week, as we're both here in LA. But hopefully next week we'll get back together for another episode of the Crown Report. Scott, thanks so much. We will talk again soon, and we'll see you next time, Kings fans.